I believe it was 1972 when Scott Autrey came onto the scene. He had extensive motorcycle experience. He had road racing. He was a famous flat tracker. I mean, he raced the Baja as a 12-year-old kid and won. I mean, this kid, like, he did a lot of stuff. His dad really supported him. But when he got into the Speedway in 72, he was like a raw rookie. And you obviously must have raced with Scott Autrey. And he came in there and just, I mean, this guy never rode a Speedway bike. And then at the end of the year, he was on the podium at the national championship, #2, behind Rick Woods and above Mike Bass. And he was on the podium right below Woods and right above Mike Bass. What was that about?
Well, Scott, there's certain people in this world that are made or have been born to do one thing, and that's race. And that's Scott Autrey. I mean, he could race anything. He could road race. He could ride flat track. I first met Scott, or first saw him, was when I was like 16. When I first started racing, he was racing at Paris and Elsinore. And he raced in TT, and he rode flat track and a bunch of different things as well. And yeah, he was a guy that was probably going to go on to race Class C, half mile, along those lines, and it would have had a very successful career as well. And I don't know what made him change or what brought him to making Speedway his career exactly. I don't think I've ever asked him. But he was just one of those kind of guys. And to give you an idea how good he was, I remember when he first started that we all could figure out what rear sprocket people were running, 69 tooth, 72, depending on what. But the engine sprocket was always an 18. That's what they came with, an 18-tooth engine sprocket. Well, we used to run a 1670 or a 1669. Well, his sponsors didn't know that. So they got the back sprocket right, but the front sprocket still at 18.
18?
So he was like 8 teeth higher than everybody else. And when he first started, and he would go down the straightaway like a bullet. Because that thing would hook up, but we'd go to the corner. You could never get it to slide because it was geared so high. But he rode that thing, and he made it work somehow. And then it didn't take long for them to figure it all out. But he had success. But Scott's success came, of course, being going to Europe and racing in Europe. And I had the pleasure of going to Europe with Scott and Bill Cody and a bunch of other guys. A whole group of us went for a 2-week trip to watch the World Final at Wembley. And we went to a lot of different racetracks while we were there. And Scott and I roomed together for those 2 weeks. And I'll kind of keep this short. I know we have a lot of, I don't want to keep it too long, but suffice it to say, we went to Wembley. We went to Wimbledon. And Wimbledon was a great racetrack. We watched the races there. And Bill Cody and Scott Autrey were invited to go down and ride right on the track after the races were over, because they had the track open for practice for second division riders. And Ronnie Moore, who was a 3-time world champion, was on that Wimbledon team. And they both got a chance to ride one of Ronnie Moore's backup bikes. And they both looked fantastic. Scott looked great. He was, I think, 18 at the time, 18, 19, had long blonde hair. And he was very excited. And he decided, I think right then, if they offered him a contract, he was going to go. And which he did. Bill was more of a pragmatist. Bill was going, I don't know. I can make more money at home than I can here. And riding over there and living over there and racing over there back then was not easy. I learned that right away. And I said, man, my dreams of becoming world champion, I just didn't have it in me. I didn't have the talent, first of all, but I didn't have the stamina or the wherewithal to even want to do that. But he did. And I remember he was gone, and then he came back a few years later and ride the championship here at Costa Mesa, and I do believe he won it. But Scott Autrey is just one of those guys who was a pioneer. He was by himself over there in Europe. He had no support. I mean, got support while I was there, but he was a lone ranger, really. And he paved the way for Bruce Penhall and everybody else that came after him. So my hat's off to Scott. He's a great guy, a very humble guy, and he finally got rewarded by being a member of the Trailblazers, which I thought was a great accomplishment. He deserved every bit of it.
Scott Autrey deserves every acclimate, every honor you can get, because that guy was unbelievable. I mean, he's like one of a kind, Scott Autrey.
Oh yeah, he was certainly that. He was one of a kind.
It was one. I just, I hate to say this on the show because people may think wrong or something, but I always kind of think, like, what if Scott Autrey never went to Europe? What if he stayed in America? I mean, with his talent level, he probably would have bumped Mike Bass off the podium a few times.
Well, you never know. You never know. Scott was the kind of guy. I mean, one year we had Speedway racing in Daytona Beach during Daytona Speed Week, and Scott was part of that. Well, he rode the Speedway races on the Speedway track, which we all raced at. He rode the short track, I believe, also, which was Class C, and he also rode the 250 class in the Daytona road race. All that week. I mean, he did all those things, as I believe. I'm correct. And he was telling me that was before they had the chicane. They had that back straightaway. They have this chicane that goes in and out to slow everybody down before they went to the back turn on the banking. He told me they didn't have that. He said going down that back straightaway, going in that corner at 130 or 40, he said the G-force was so hard it would collapse all the suspension. He said you couldn't even get your head off the gas tank because it was just pressing you into the banking. And but he was a great racer, very versatile. One of the most versatile racers you'll ever find.
Yeah. I try to get Scott on the show, and he's like, nobody wants to remember me. And I go, I want to remember you, Scott. I want to remember you. And he's just a humble guy. He's a great guy.
He has a lot. There's a lot there. He could, he should go on. I mean, there's a lot you can ask him. Yeah, he really should.
I mean, Scott has been there and done that. I mean, I think in that time, I guess it was at Wimbledon when he was racing Ronnie Moore's bike. Actually, I think it was Ivan Major discovered him and said, I want that guy on my team. And actually, I think Ivan Major pulled the strings to get Scott Autrey in Europe, if I'm not mistaken.
That could very well be true. I don't know the details of all that, but yeah, that could very well be true.
Because his talent was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we'll never know if Scott Autrey would have won a United States championship like in the 70s, because he was over in Europe. And also, he was, like you said, he was a pioneer, and he just went ahead and, like, there was no Americans over in Europe, and he paved the way for Penhall, like you say, and all these guys going over to Europe.